Hello, and welcome to the Hot Topics section of the Back to School training. My name is Jennifer Stafford. I'm the Director in the Division of Assessment and Support. With me today is Michael Hackworth, our branch manager. This is the first in a series of the Back to School trainings that will prepare you as you get ready for your 2017-18 school year. Let's take a look at the agenda for our Hot Topics section. First, we'll discuss the 2016-17 upcoming reporting. We'll look at the future of the school report card and take a glance at the 2017-18 testing, and then we'll get into the proposed accountability system and where the discussion is with the Board of Education and where the accountability system is at the present moment. So, Michael, let's turn to the 2016-17 reporting.
Hello everyone. I hope everyone had a great summer and you're excited to begin your new school year. The first thing that we'd like to share with you today is on 2016-17 reporting. At the end of May, the Commissioner sent out an email stating what schools district would receive on their school report card this year. And if you will look at this slide with me, you will be able to tell that schools, the district, and state will not receive an overall score that combines learners and program reviews. They will not receive component scores, which means learners and program reviews individually, nor will they receive classifications or labels. What schools, districts, and the state will receive is data for the components such as achievement, gap, growth, and growth was in elementary and middle school, CCR, and the graduation rate for high school. If districts and schools chose to report their program reviews, then that will be available. Looking at our future and the school report card, if you went to a town hall meeting this past spring, many people received a glimpse at what the future school report card may look like. And here is an updated slide of where we are with this right now. Now, when you log on to the KDE website for your data this fall, you will be taken to this landing page, which is a model school report card. And as you can see, you will see the indicators of the proposed system. We have moved to a star rating. Schools will receive anywhere from 1 star, with 1 star being the lowest, to 5 stars. And, we've added the graduation rate. Now, the graduation rate will not be a dial. It will be listed as a percentage for the school, district, and state. Once you log on to the KDE website and you see this page, there will actually be a short video that is embedded on the top of this, and this video will be Commissioner Pruitt explaining, the future school report card, what it may look like, and the direction that Kentucky is headed in. Once you watch that video, which will only be maybe 2 minutes, maybe 3, you will be able to exit out. You will see this model dashboard. This data on this model dashboard will not be actual school data or district data that relates to your school or district. It will just be dummy data, and you can just see what it'll look like. Somewhere on this page, you will see a link that will take you to the actual 16-17 school year data, and it will look very similar to years past. So you will go to the KDE website, you'll go to school report card, you will land on this landing page, there will be a video. You can click out of the video. Once you look at this model dashboard, then you can click a link which will appear somewhere on the page, and it will take you to your actual 16-17 school year data. Looking at what testing may look like for the 17-18 school year, as you can see, we have created this table that lists the content areas and the assessments on the left column. And then across the top, you see your grade levels from grades 3 through 12. Reading and math will still be tested at grades 3 through 8. Science at 4 and 7. Social studies, 5 and 8. On demand will be 5, 8, and 11, And then editing and mechanics will be field tested this year at 5, 8, and 11. College admissions exam, we've had a lot of questions regarding this assessment this year. For this year, every junior in the state of Kentucky will continue to take the ACT. We still have a contract with ACT that goes through spring 2018, and over the next few months, we will be sending out an RFP for people to bid on for a future college admissions examination to take place in the 18-19 school year. With that assessment, once the bid is made and the offer is in place, then students will test at grades 10 and 11. But again, for this year, it will be ACT for juniors in the spring. Our EOC courses, this year we have 3 field tests. They will be English 2, Algebra 2, and Biology. U.S. History will not be field tested this year, and we will field test that once the standards for social studies are revised. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer, and Jennifer is going to lead us into the proposed accountability system.
Thank you, Michael. As you can see, we are in a transition period between one accountability system and another. This year, for fall reporting, and as Michael has just indicated, schools will not receive any type of classification for needs improvement, proficient, or distinguished, labeling the schools or districts. So we're in a transition period to the new accountability system. And currently, we have draft regulation that the Kentucky Board of Education has heard once, and at the beginning of July, we created and released a second version of a regulation. Now, at the beginning of July, we put that out for public review and was able to share that with the board, and DACs and BACs, superintendents, all of our advisory groups were able to review that. And after we put that out in the 1st of July, then we had many of the formal groups in the accountability development system meet. The beginning with SCAC met in early July. I think that was July 10th. And we met with SCAC, and they gave us a lot of good input. Now, SCAC stands for our School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Committee. So they are governor appointed, and we received new members, and they reviewed the draft regulation and provided really good feedback. That same week, we met with our National Technical Advisory staff, national experts who reviewed our regulation, and we got a lot of positive feedback on our regulation that we have gone forward with. Continuing that week, on July 14th, we met with our regulatory review as well as our consequential review development committee. We had, again, a lot of positive feedback, and we took forward some suggestions to our local superintendent advisory committee on July 25th. So our local superintendent advisory committee heard the recommendations from the previous committees that we met with the week before and provided additional input. So across the development of the new accountability system, we've had a lot of positive feedback, a lot of good feedback, and the regulation has been developed, it's been clarified, there is more detail in the regulation than there was previously. The Kentucky Board of Education met again and heard a updated version of that regulation. So based on the feedback that we received from all of those different committees, the Kentucky Board of Education took into consideration the feedback and is provided very good direction on the proposed accountability system. So where we are in the process right now is we are continuing to develop the regulation based on the feedback from the Kentucky Board of Education, and will soon have another meeting with the Kentucky Board of Education on the proposed accountability system, which they, at this point, will vote on. So we can anticipate another updated regulation for the proposed accountability system. Now, for our DACs and BACs, we want to be very clear in the fact that this proposed accountability system is to take place in the school year beginning 2018-2019. So all of the pieces that we are going to discuss now are going to take place in the future. So this is the future of our assessment and accountability. What Michael just presented is what we are reporting this year. Which is going to be different. It's the old unbridled learners accountability model that we're transitioning away from. So that unbridled learner accountability model, it's past, it's the history. We're in a transition period to this new accountability system that we're getting ready to discuss. So we're in this transition period between the old model and our new accountability system. And that's where we want to focus on, where we're going with Kentucky education, because we want our system to improve. We want our students to have a very rigorous educational experience, a very rich educational experience, so that when they are ready to transition to that next stage of their academic career or their life after high school, that they are well prepared for where they want to be once they leave. So understand that DACs and BACs, you're going to be asked about where we are in the process. So this is a transition year. We're getting ready to transition for the next couple years, so 2017 fall reporting as well as 2018 fall reporting will be this transition from the old to the new. So let's take a look at the new. Looking at the accountability system, it promotes higher levels of student learning and achievement. The key goal is to reduce the achievement gap. And if I can say one overarching theme of the accountability system is a central focus on closing the achievement gap and ensuring equity for all of our students. It establishes opportunity and access for students to receive a quality education, build culture and high expectations for continuous improvement, and to very clearly and honestly communicate the strength and opportunities that our schools and districts have. Now, three guiding principles of our agency are achievement, integrity, and equity. And the communication to clearly and honestly say that schools have strengths and schools have areas for opportunities, and as well as students. That's very important to us as an agency. The indicators of the proposed system have changed a bit, so we're going to talk through some of the changes that are currently in place and are continuing to be proposed. First, the proficiency, we'll discuss how that's changed a bit, because there are a couple of changes since the version that you may have seen in June or early July. There's a separate academic indicator for science and social studies. We'll discuss that and how it is developed. Growth is still at elementary and middle school. Transition ready is at middle school, elementary school, as well as high school. So there are all three levels within transition readiness. Graduation rate has changed since you may have seen a previous version. And the achievement gap closure has two parts, gap to group and gap to proficiency. And then finally, we'll talk about the opportunity and access and how that all comes together in an overall rating. So first, let's look at proficiency. Proficiency is what we are most familiar with in Kentucky. It's reaching the desired level of knowledge and skills as measured on academic assessments. Now, this is changed a bit since you may have seen a previous version, in that it's student performance on reading, writing, and math. So we have separated science and social studies from proficiency. And as we are developing this proposed accountability system, we're also writing our ESSA plan, our Every Student Succeeds Act plan for the U.S. Department of Education, to show that we are meeting the federal government's expectations for testing and accountability. Now, what we've noticed is that other states who chose to submit their plan in April have begun to receive feedback. And in that feedback, the Department of Education has indicated to other states that science and social studies, being an academic indicator, is not as favorable as if it's linked to our reading and math. So what we've done is we've taken science and social studies and separated those content area assessments from proficiency into a separate academic indicator. So for proficiency, when we talk about proficiency specifically, we're talking about the student performance on state assessments in reading and mathematics. And it will be reported from a status of novice, apprentice, proficient, and distinguished, similar to what we've had in the past. The indicator takes into account the same weights that we've used previously for novice, apprentice, and proficient. However, we've added an additional credit at the distinguished level. So you'll notice that novice would receive a 0 credit for the school, apprentice would receive a 0.5, proficient at 1. And previously in our former accountability systems, distinguished and proficient had always been the same. But in this new proposed accountability system, we are proposing that distinguished credit the school at 1.5 for each student that receives a distinguished level. So the second academic indicator, as I mentioned, is for science and social studies, equally weighted between science and social studies and across the other content areas for reading, writing, and math will be equally weighted. We will also count the novice, apprentice, proficient, and distinguished levels within the separate academic indicators, the same as we do for the proficiency. So if a student received novice for science and social studies, it would be the same amount of credit for science and social studies as it is reading, writing, and math. And then the same for apprentice, proficient, and distinguished within the separate academic indicator. Let's turn our attention now to growth, because growth is really different than it has been previously. In the previous model, what we had is in growth that only 40% of the students could not meet growth and 60% could. With the new proposed accountability system, each individual student would have an annual personal target for improvement based on that student's past performance, current performance, and then how the students are projected into the future. So taking into account how the student performs in previous assessments and current assessment, the student would be projected toward the goal of proficiency. Now, if the student is on track to reach proficiency in 2 years, then the student would be thought of as catching up. If the student is at proficient and stays proficient or distinguished, then the student would be keeping up. But if the student moves from proficient up to distinguished, then the student is moving up. So the growth measures for elementary and middle school in reading and math would be developed and reported by a evaluation of the students catching up, keeping up, or moving up. Also within the English language proficiency on growth is going to be included at the elementary and middle school levels also. So when we're looking at English language progress on the acquisition of the language skills, we're looking at the access test. So within the elementary and middle school, that progress on the access test that we're currently using, then look at how the student is progressing in their attainment of English language. So we would include growth on the English language proficiency assessment within the growth at the elementary and middle school levels. Now, let's look at a growth value table. As you can see from the growth value table, along the left-hand side we see a column that says current. Along the top row is projected. So if we look at the table, you can see that there are varying colors. The white color is the term less than catch up. These students that would fall in this area are not on track to be proficient within 2 years. The next color, the catch up, the darker shade of gray, is catch up. These students that fall within that shading would be deemed catching up. The students that are proficient and stay proficient, or are distinguished and stay distinguished, they are keeping up. And then along the right-hand side, the lighter shade of gray, then in the distinguished area, the students who move from lower performance levels to distinguished are moving up. So we will report in terms of less than catch up, keep up, and move up. But let's look at how the points are determined for each of those students and how they are performing and projected to perform. So for example, if we have a student that is currently at apprentice low, so we look at that left-hand column, go down to apprentice low, and they are projected to be apprentice low. So they are less than catch up, which means that in 2 years they are not projected to be proficient and would earn 0 credit for the school in the accountability system. Let's look at another example. Let's look at apprentice high. A student who is currently performing at apprentice high and is projected to be at proficient within 2 years. So you look at the intersection between apprentice high and proficient, and you see that is in the darker shade of gray. The student would be catching up and would earn the school 0.25 credits within the accountability system. So the growth value table is a set of numbers that the school would be credited for getting the students prepared for the next couple years of their academic career. So again, the students would be reported as less than catch up, keep up, or move up. A similar growth table would be created for our English language learners. Now, let's talk about transition readiness. And Michael, can you tell us about transition readiness?
Sure. We're going to start off by looking at, the definition that we have for transition readiness, and that is the attainment of the necessary knowledge, skills, and dispositions to successfully move to the next level of education, work, or life. And as Jennifer said earlier, transition readiness is going to be measured at elementary, middle, and high school. Let's first look at elementary and middle school of how transition readiness will be measured. For both elementary and middle, it is meeting a benchmark on a composite score that combines student performance on reading and writing, math, science, and social studies. At the elementary school, it's by grade 5, and at the middle school, it's by grade 8. Now, if you will look, for example, at the elementary school, notice that, it is the composite score of all of those content areas. So a student in the elementary school will take the science assessment at grade 4. So that assessment would be what would go into the overall composite score. And the same is true with the middle school. Science would be, counted for the grade 7 science assessment, and then all of the others assessments at grade 8. So it's the last assessment that they took in that grade span that the composite score will be made from. For transition readiness at the high school, it's earning more than just a high school diploma. It's going to require that students demonstrate academic, career, or military readiness. It also adds EL students in the mix. EL students are expected to demonstrate English language proficiency before leaving high school. And we have a nice chart that's available that kind of shows you the transition readiness model for the high school. Again, first, if you look at the top, a student must earn that high school diploma to go in that transition readiness calculation. And then the table is divided into columns. You have academic readiness, technical readiness, which we are going to call career readiness, military readiness, and then you have a column for, your English language learners. We have added a lot more opportunities for students to become, academic ready or career ready from the previous model in unbridled learning, which would be the old college and career readiness chart. But if you just take a look at the academic column, it will be benchmarks, meeting benchmarks that are determined by the Council on Post-Secondary Education on a college admissions exam. So, for this year, for example, it would be the ACT. For the 18-19 school year, it will be whatever assessment is in place for that college admissions exam. Or a grade of B or better on 6 more hours of KBE approved dual credit, 3+ on exams of at least 2 more AP courses, or a score of 5+ on at least 2 or more exams for IB courses. And then we have one final option, or at least 2 or more on the Cambridge Advanced International Examinations. So as you can see from this column, there are a lot more opportunities for a student to become academic ready than what was in our previous system. For career readiness, it is meeting the benchmarks on industry certifications. These industry certifications are approved by the Kentucky Workforce Innovation Board on an annual basis. CTE provides that list to districts and career and technical education coordinators each year. So make sure you stay in contact with those people in your district because they can give you that approved list of industry certifications. So also is COSA. And that is COSA that is approved with articulated credit tied to it. Currently, there are over 30 COSAs in the state of Kentucky. 12 have articulated credit tied to them, but the consultants in the Office of Career and Technical Education are working on, adding to that list. So they are working with colleges and universities throughout the state to form additional articulated credit agreements that are tied to COSA. So again, back in the career readiness model, and that column, we have benchmarks on industry certifications or COSA, and a student must earn one of the next few things that I'm going to mention. So a score of B or better on 6 or more approved career and technical education dual credit courses, or completes 2 CTE credits, enroll in the 3rd credit in a CTE program of study, or an approved apprenticeship that is approved by KDE and the Labor Cabinet, or approved alternate process to verify exceptional work experience that is approved by KDE. So you have your ors, and then you have your ands, and then more ors to choose from. So you have to really look at this and pay attention to where the ors are and the ands are, so that you are making sure that your students get the correct credit for what they earn. Our military readiness column, it is actually still in discussion, but as of right now, it is meeting the benchmark on the ASVAB, which is the 50 on the AFQT, and enlist in a branch of military service. That is what is proposed at this time, but there is a lot of discussion going on with this column in our transition readiness model. Our fourth column is, English language learners. It applies to those students. They do need to reach proficiency, and then they would also need to be, either academic, career, or military in order to get that transition readiness credit. For students that are participating in the alternate assessment program and earning an alternate diploma, there's going to be a special criteria for those students, and we are currently, working with our partners on alternate assessment so that they have the availability to be academic, career ready as well.
Thank you, Michael. You will note that the college placement exam is absent in that proposed model. Now, currently, for the 2017-18 school year, we do have Coyote available to our schools and districts. At this point, it is still available. We are still supporting it as a department, and we will continue to do so for the 2017-18 school year. So if you would like to use that assessment, please feel free to do that. You can use it for local purposes, for placement into the dual credit programs, as Michael mentioned, as well as the AP classes, if you need some type of criteria for the students to meet to enter those courses. So right now, Coyote is still available for you to use at the local level. So let's look now at the next indicator of our accountability system, which is the graduation rate.
Okay. And, actually, just to define it, the graduation rate is the percentage of students completing the requirements for a Kentucky high school diploma compared to a cohort of students beginning at grade 9. Kentucky will use a 4- and 5-year adjusted cohort rate in accountability, and they will both be created equally when it comes to the calculation. So each one, it'll be 50-50. And graduation rate, the calculations will be based on the student's final enrollment.
The next indicator of the accountability model includes the achievement gap closure. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's a central focus on closing the achievement gap. If you've heard our commissioner talk, and many of you were able to attend the CAKE conference, the Kentucky Association of Academic Coordinators, or Assessment Coordinators, last September, you heard him very, very directly say that we need to own the achievement gap, and we need to make sure that all students are engaged in rigorous curriculum, have opportunities to rich curriculum, and have the access to advanced level courses. So when we say there's a central focus on closing the achievement gap, we feel that all students are important and should have opportunities to grow. The achievement gap closure measure looks at two criteria. It is the disparity between the performance of our student groups in comparison to a criteria. So we're looking at gap to group and gap to proficiency. So let's discuss each of these measures separately. The gap to group is a comparison of the performances between a comparison group and a reference group. So the comparison group would be the student demographic group that is being compared to a reference group. And the reference group is the student demographic group that has at least 10 students and represent 10% of the population that score the highest in a particular performance area. So looking at gap to group, we're comparing the student reference group, the highest demographic group performance compared to other student demographic groups. Looking at gap to proficiency, it's the comparison between the student demographic groups and an annual target toward proficiency by each student demographic group. So when we look at the comparison for our gap to groups, for our racial and ethnic student groups, they will be compared to each other. So looking at and comparing the reference group, that highest performing racial or ethnic group, then will be compared to other racial groups. So for example, if you have a population of Asian students that are at least 10 students and represent 10% of your population, then that student demographic group, that Asian group, will be compared to African American, Hispanic, Hawaiian Pacific Islander, Native American, Alaskan, white, and 2 or more races. So first you have to find where the reference group, which reference group is the highest, and then make the comparison. For our other groups, it's the inverse. So we'll compare our free and reduced lunch students to our non-free and reduced lunch students. Our English learners compared to the students that are not English learners. Our students with disabilities will be compared with students without disabilities. So for our gap to group, it'll be comparison to either a racial group or the inverse of the student groups that have the services. Now when we get to gap to proficiency, we add a consolidated student group that includes all of our racial or ethnic student groups except for white, economically disadvantaged, and our Asian group. You may ask, well, why don't we include the economically disadvantaged, our free and reduced lunch population, in our student consolidated group? Across Kentucky, the demographic that is so largely affects each of our schools is our free and reduced lunch meals. So if we included the free and reduced price lunch meal students within the consolidated group, it would overshadow all of the other racial or ethnic student groups. So we've decided not to include our free and reduced price lunch meal students within that consolidated group. Each of these student demographic groups will be compared to a criterion, gap to proficiency, that each of the demographic groups will have a target to attain to, and it will be the closure of that disparity between where the student performance is and reaching that goal. So we're looking at, within each of these two measures, we're looking at two things. We're looking at the status of the student demographic group and closing that achievement gap between the student groups or the students and the goal toward proficiency. Opportunity and access has been the most debated part of the accountability system. Back in 2016 and in the early part of 2017, we had town halls and many people came out to discuss opportunity and access. I mentioned earlier our National Technical Advisory Program, our national experts. who are made up of national experts. And Dan Koretz is one of our national experts that is on our National Technical Advisory Program. He's a Harvard professor. He's written a book many of you have read, I know, called Measuring Up. And he has been a technical advisor to Kentucky for many years and has in the past been quite critical of our accountability systems. Well, in this system, he was very supportive. We were very excited to hear his positive comments about our accountability system. Another of our technical advisors, Phoebe Winters, she is very vocal that she is school and state accountability has its problems, and she said with the model that we are creating here in Kentucky, it takes care of all of her concerns about state and school accountability, and more so because it's not based on student scores. It involves many other aspects beyond the state students' achievement on our state assessments. So opportunity and access, although much discussed within the state and will be very hard to measure, has gotten a lot of positive feedback across the nation. So when we look at the opportunity and access, it takes into account 4 areas. The first being equitable access. Equitable access to student-based experiences and school factors that impact student success. It looks at measuring in terms of rich curriculum, equitable access, quality school measures, and providing support for the whole child. And now, many of these areas have not been collected when we are having to develop processes within Infinite Campus so that these measures will be able to be collected from our schools and districts. And then pieces of them are required and other pieces will be optional for our schools and districts. Now, these proposed measures that would contribute to the overall rating of the school are in draft. These are being discussed and will eventually be approved by the Kentucky Board of Education. So looking at rich curriculum, we heard very strongly that visual and performing arts, health and PE, and science and social studies are very important for our elementary, middle school students, as well as our high school students. So looking at what the percentage of time and the percentage of students are offered for elementary school students to have access to and participate in these academic standards. Middle school students, when you look at the middle school, and career exploration has been added to the other measures beyond the elementary school. And then when we get to high school, looking at not only visual and performing arts, health and PE, but also cultural studies and world language. And then the additional piece of access to complete career pathways within a career and technical education program. And then recently has been added the demonstration of essential skills by earning a bronze or higher on a work ethic certificate. And those, again, are in discussion. That work ethic certification is being developed in another project. So these measures, again, are draft and are being developed. When we look at equitable access, it's the access to groups and supports of gifted and talented services at 4th and 5th grade that's equal to or greater than the percentage of our school population. So looking at the students who are actually in gifted and talented services, and are the students that are receiving gifted and talented services proportional to all the students groups and reflective of the school population. At middle school, again, the gifted and talented students groups in comparison to the school population. And then at high school, looking at advanced coursework and the student demographics within the advanced coursework. Now, when we looked at data about 6 months to a year ago in AP classes, it was very surprising the percentage of our African American students that were in AP classes. It was minimal compared to the percentage of African American students population that we have in the state. So, equitable access. Who has access to gifted and talented services as well as advanced level coursework? More proposed required measures are around school quality. School quality would include measures such as chronically absent, and newly added to meet the requirements of Senate Bill 1 are safety measures of behavior events as well as physical restraint and seclusion. Now, behavior events are such things as the number of occurrences of drugs in the school, weapons in the school, things of that nature. Behavior events that are reported and currently collected within Infinite Campus and the school report card. Now, within the school quality is a local measure that each district or public charter school would define where they want to improve. Now, when you see the version of the next version of the regulation, a district and public charter are going to be defined as a local education association. So LEA is a entity that is controlled by a board, and we understand that our public charter schools will be have oversight from a board. So when we in the regulation, when you see district replaced with LEA, know that it is, the LEA definition is, includes a district or public charter school that is, has oversight from a board. So each LEA would have the opportunity to enter into a negotiation with the Kentucky Department of Education on an improvement area that the LEA would decide that they want to improve. I can give you one example that we've heard it from Northern Kentucky District. They would like to have an increase of all of their students receiving dual credit. So that could possibly be an option that the district would then propose to the Department of Education. Each of the objectives would need to be specific, it would need to be measurable, it would need to be achievable, relevant, and would be time-bound. So this process will be developed over the next couple years and in place for the new accountability system when it comes into place. Now, measures around the whole child are currently going to be proposed as selected. So schools could select, at this point, 2 of the 6 options for our whole child measures. So looking at the proposed measures would include the school-based counselor or mental health service provider with knowledge of counseling and adolescent development. The school could choose to have a school nurse or provide other health provider. Could include a library media specialist at their school, have access to family resource centers that provide support to our low-income students. And they could choose to have subjects taught by certified teachers in music, art, theater, media arts, physical education, health, world language at the elementary, middle, and secondary levels. And then finally, access to a career counselor or a career coach. And in the current regulation, we do have definitions for a career counselor and a career coach. Now, each of these measures are proposed, and looking at the metrics, it's either full-time, less than full-time, or a percentage of the specialist time that would gain the school or district points progressively. The reported measures, not part of the selected measures, but we would report measures around, for elementary school, state-funded preschool, percentage of kindergarten students that are served half-day or whole-day, and then across all levels, the percentage of teacher turnover, percentage of first-year turnover, and then the percentage of students belonging to the demographic groups assigned out-of-school suspension. So those are reported measures. Now, each of the big indicators that we've discussed proficiency, the separate academic indicator for science and social studies, growth, achievement gap closure, transition readiness, graduation rate, and opportunity and access. We will have a standard setting for each of those different pieces and determine how the school will be rated in terms of very low, low, medium, high, and very high. So within each of those indicators within the system, the school will have some type of classification of very low all the way to very high. And depending on how those come together, then those individual indicators and the relationship between those individual indicators will result in a star rating. So the star rating is a 1-star rating to a 5-star rating, with 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. With the overall rating, there will be some caps. Particularly if a school or district is identified for targeted assistance and improvement or comprehensive support and improvement, the school or district may not get above a 3-star rating. So there will be some caps on the supplemental labels and that 5-star rating. That's a high-level overview of the proposed accountability system that will be reviewed again by the Kentucky Board of Education. There will be a special board meeting to discuss the regulation, the overall accountability regulation, and the next step for that is for them to discuss and approve that regulation. Once the regulation can move forward, then it goes into the regulatory process. It will have to be filed with our Legislative Review Committee, LRC. We will have it open for public comment, and we will have a open hearing for our public comment. We will have to consider each of the public comments and respond to each of those. It will take several months to work collaboratively with the LRC to have a final regulation in place. So the regulation, the new accountability system, it will be months away, but we will keep our DACs informed of the progress that the regulation and where it is within the regulatory system. Now, we do have a state plan that I mentioned earlier due to the U.S. Department of Education. It's our consolidated Title I ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act consolidated plan. The regulation impacts the state plan. So these proposed measures will be included in the state plan as draft because that's what they are right now. So we anticipate that we will work with the U.S. Department of Education and get their feedback on our proposed accountability system. So many steps have to be taken and many discussions have to be had before this regulation will be in place and we have a new accountability system. In the meantime, we welcome your comments, we welcome your questions about the future of accountability and where we are reporting for the 2017 and 2018 testing. We're here for you. If you have any questions, you can contact any of us at our Division of Assessment Support, and we will promptly give you information that we have, let you know where we are in the process, and keep you well informed of where we are along the process. We thank you very much for your time and attention today during this hot topic session. There are other sessions, so we encourage you to watch the other pieces of our back-to-school training. And we wish you and your students the best for the 2017-18 school year. Thank you.